Welcome to the podcast where relationships, confidence, and determination all converge into an amazing, heartfelt experience. This is Speaking from the Heart.
Welcome back to episode number 132 of Speaking from the Heart. Today we'll have Jenny Jansen joining us, and she's a licensed independent social worker of clinical practice and also a certified adult chair master coach. She has always had a passion for helping and relating to others in vulnerable and meaningful ways. Walking through her own journey of healing and self-discovery, she considers herself a student of life and the love child of all she has learned and encountered. She uses a unique blend of tools and techniques from her mental health and coaching backgrounds to help individuals gain self-awareness and courage to release unhealthy patterns, find their truth, connect with their inner knowing, and confidently step into a grounded and conscious life of authenticity and meaningful connection with themselves and others. Jenny is the owner of Conscious Living Therapy and Coaching Practice and sees individuals, couples, and families virtually on the local and international levels. She currently lives in South Carolina with her dog, Abby. I've always found it interesting with some of the guests that we've had of the stories that have enlightened me, and possibly even you for that matter, of how they gotten to where they are at. But when Jenny started talking about the three chairs and essentially what it has meant to walk through each of those different chairs, it started to make me think about all the different aspects of my life and the chairs that I have sat in and spent a lot of time trying to process and develop my true version of myself. Whether you're going through a crisis in your life or you're helping somebody else that might be going through some of the same, just remember that how we overlap with each other, with creating that value, figuring out how to manifest those feelings of being able to accomplish what we're able to accomplish, but also those connections that, despite what might be going on in our life, discernment and being able to work through that discernment is key. I think that our intention and being able to address those sort of situations that we have coming up in our life can make a big difference in how we stay involved and how we stay engaged. And you're going to find out how all of those interlap in this awesome interview that I will not soon forget. But with that, let's go to the episode. All right, we're here with Jenny Jansen. Jenny, thanks for sharing your heart with us today.
Hey, Joshua. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thanks so much. And we've already had a wonderful conversation before we even started this. So I feel like our listeners are going to get so much out of this, even today for that matter, about what we're providing. So
I'm so excited.
Me too.
I was excited when we were starting to talk, and I was like, "Oh, wait, this isn't part. Like, let's go back and rewind and share all the awesome." I don't know. We just kind of got into a really great flow initially, so it was.
No, I love it, and I think our listeners will follow up with it too. So, Jenny, I've already let them know a lot about your background and what you do, and I actually want to kick off this conversation with a simple question. You do therapy work. What got you in this field? Because I always find it interesting how people get into this platform, if you will.
Yeah.
So what got you started in it?
Well, I say in my previous life, I was actually a fifth grade teacher. So I started out my career out of college as an elementary school teacher, and I've always had this drive to help people. And everyone's like, "Oh, you're so good with kids, and you love being with kids," and so it just felt like the natural thing to do. But then being a teacher, it's very challenging. And I realized that I was spending a lot of my time helping people, but in ways that didn't really align with my heart. I love teachers. There is a beautiful place in the world for teachers. And I was tired of spending it on teaching them the ocean floor and function tables and things like that. And so I found for me personally that the most meaningful experiences that I had as a teacher or when my kids would say, "Miss Jansen, can we take a walk at recess? Or can I talk to you about something? Or like, can I sit with you at lunch?" And they really wanted to connect with me on that heart level about things that they were going through in their lives. And so when I felt that my pull away from classroom educating and teaching into more of the personal teaching of life skills and how am I going to navigate my parents getting divorced or my brother going to jail or things like that, I decided to quit teaching and I got into a social work program. But before that, I hit about a 2-year period where I call it my quarter life crisis, where I kind of had to break myself down and then realize, like, okay, what am I actually on this earth to do? And got really still and quiet with myself and pulled myself up. Long story short, not pleasant, but once I got into grad school, I got my master's degree in social work and started working in community mental health at that time. And so I like to say part of it is because being a teacher and wanting to connect with those kids on that deep level. But also, of course, as we were talking about before we recorded, nobody gets out of this life without pain and suffering. And so, of course, walking through my own journey of healing and self-discovery and going to my own therapy as a teenager and young adult, I was very inspired by the power of therapy and the power of being able to share your story in safe places and navigate and realize that you're not alone and that you don't have to sit in suffering. You don't have to deal with all of the life things without support. So that's always been my goal as a therapist, and then later becoming a certified life coach, is to validate people's experiences, because pain is relative.
Yeah.
My suffering is just as important as your suffering, just as important as the next person's suffering, and it all deserves a voice to be heard. And so I think we suffer when we keep our secrets. We suffer when we sit in silence and don't believe that we have that safe person to bounce these things off of. And so that has always been my drive, is to be that person for my clients. And ironically enough, I never ended up working with kids. I see more so teenagers, like 13, 14 is probably the youngest that I see, or 12. But majority of my clients are adults and are learning now how to basically get what they didn't get when they were kids and being able to offer that for themselves. Anyway, I think that that's my why. That's why I do what I do, is to help people to realize that they don't have to do life alone. I kind of have a dual business where I have some therapy clients, I have some coaching clients, and I'm just kind of following my own path and not trying to fit myself into what I thought my life was going to look like, and being open to how it's unfolding.
I can relate to that because growing up, I thought, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer. And even my grandfather, when he was alive, was like, you're going to be the doctor of the family. And I'm like, no way. I don't have any aspirations for blood or dealing with those things. I mean,
Yeah.
and I grew up at a farm, so I've seen all kinds of variety of life stages, if you will. But
Mm-hmm.
even with that, I didn't have that passion. And I resonate with the fact that we might have one idea in mind. It's almost like taking those tests growing up of, what are you going to be as a future version of yourself? What career are you aspiring to be? Astronaut, whatever that is. But
Yeah.
I love that you said you kind of blend these things together. And I noticed that when we're talking about this conversation, and I've had other therapists on the show, there's all kinds of things that blend together as part of our makeup. And you were talking about, even before we started the show here, about all these different things that kind of play into your life. Was there like a catalyst maybe of different life events that created what you had as that aspiration to help others? Because you've talked about what it's meant to help and be able to be that sounding board, be able to guide
Mm-hmm.
them. I'm wondering if there's been some life events that have shaped and molded you into that too.
Oh, 100%. And I think growing up, my mom, she used to joke and say, you must have an invisible tattoo on your forehead that says, I will listen. Because I've always just kind of had that energy of people coming to me and telling me their problems. And even as a kid, and I say kid, like, teenage stuff. Like, we all kind of have experiences, family challenges. And I moved when I was in middle school from New York to South Carolina. That was a pretty big culture shock and challenge, even though it was the best thing that probably could have happened for me. I think going through just natural struggles, I started going to therapy for myself when I was in high school and navigating anxiety, depression, but trying to understand that, and this has been kind of a long-standing lesson that I've learned as I've encountered different life challenges in my adulthood too, is that there's really nothing wrong with me. No human is inherently bad or inherently broken. We all have our struggles, and it doesn't mean that we're not worthy of love and connection and healing. And certain things that may have happened to us maybe actually happened for us. Not to say that people that go through trauma, it needed to happen in that way or that it's their fault that it happened. I'm not saying that at all. But I often think we don't see the lesson that's coming on the other side. I know I mentioned to you before we started recording, sometimes we go through these dark valleys in our lives and we feel like there's this dark pit. And that was what I called mine, where I literally had no idea. I don't see the future. I don't hear anything. I don't feel anything. I don't know where my life is going. And it feels very untethering and very scary. But at the same time, I had to go through that because then I was able to find my own internal light to guide my way. Instead of looking outside of myself for the answers, I had to go within. And if I did not have that dark pit, that dark night of the soul, people call it, I would not have come to empower myself to pull myself out.
It's kind of like trial by strength in a
Yes.
sense. Yeah. And we might not even know too that we have to go through that to get to that other side. But yeah, as I usually say, hindsight's 2020, especially in that sort of sense, because we could see it perfectly clear why we went through some of that.
Oh, we see it on the other side when it sucks. When you're in it, you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't see my way out of this. What's going to happen? And that's where, again, going back to your original question, having that meaningful connection and being that sounding board for people to know that they are not alone. I often say to my clients, I will meet you in the pits of hell if that's where you are. Hell does not scare me because I've been there, but I'm not going to carry you out. I'm going to teach you how to walk out. I'm going to walk alongside you as we get you out of hell because it's not my job to carry you out because then you don't learn for yourself.
I love that. This is exactly 100% why I'm glad that you're on the show, because I sort of had that same philosophy. Because if we carry those people through, what are they ever going to learn from it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks to be in it. And I was telling you about one of my clients before we started too, about what they're experiencing. And they are literally saying about going through that hell. But sometimes with going through that, we start to learn different habits, different ways in which we know we can help ourselves. Sometimes they're not healthy, which by all
Mhm.
means, you need to be able to recognize the difference. And that sometimes is very hard because that's an intrinsic thing and you need external help to see what the intrinsic side of what's happening there. But
Yeah.
I think you need to break it down for some people that are so wrapped up in it. So I have to ask you this because you're
Mhm.
bringing both the therapy side of this and the coaching side. You have a leg up on me, and I love that. I worship you as I
Oh
do
no.
that.
I
But
put my pants on the same way you do.
well, that's so true. Yes, and I definitely think that it's so important, though, to understand that when we do these things different ways, and I say this to other people, and I even say this to even people that are interested in me to work with. I have certain things that I can provide, but this person might be a better fit for what you provide. So I'm not hesitant. I'm not shy of doing that. It's not about the business. It's not about generating the revenue. It's about being able to help people get to where they want to be. So that's sort of a unique value proposition, unlike others. But
Mhm.
with that said, you're bringing the therapy and the coaching together with this. What do you usually tell people that are stuck in that? Do you help them with a certain technique that you've developed? Maybe there's something that you've learned in your training. I'm just curious, what usually is your first go-to? And I know that all situations are unique, but in
Mhm.
general, do you start from a common denominator?
A lot of times, and of course, people come to me for all sorts of different reasons. I do have the therapy clients, which I'm licensed in South Carolina. So, therapy, like a certain modality, you're a dialectical behavioral, or want to use your insurance benefits and things like that, I can only see clients in South Carolina. The coaching is offered worldwide. I have clients internationally as well. And some of it is an overlap. But at the same time, because a lot of the tools and techniques that I use are very holistic, even in my therapy practice, unless they come to me specifically wanting a certain modality. When I start with a client, often I, ask like, what brought you here? What's going on? And 9 times out of 10, it is not what they think it is. And so my job is to help be that mirror, that reflector of where in their life there are some maybe blind spots or there are some missing gaps or things that they're not able to see. Because that's our job as coaches and therapists is we kind of shine light on the things that the client can't see. Because if they could see them, then they wouldn't need us really. I'm trained in a model called the adult chair, which has really been a framework. I call it kind of the secret sauce because it's a really beautiful blend of how we develop over time and why we are the way we are, and the tools and coping strategies that we've developed over time that may not really be serving us anymore. So the adult chair model is basically a framework to live as the healthiest version of yourself. The woman who developed this model, her name is Michelle Chalfant. She broke our lifespan down into 3 chairs. So we have the child chair, the adolescent chair, and the adult chair. The child chair is ages 0 to 6. And think about a brand new baby, very vulnerable, very precious, very curious. Core needs, core emotions are on the forefront. If they want a cookie in the store, they're not going to hesitate to tell you, and they're going to throw a tantrum. If they are wet, they are going to cry and let you know. They don't think about, oh, mom's had a bad day. They have their core needs. And this is also, though, where we absorb everything about the world without discernment because we don't have that part of our brain developed yet. Say dad comes home from work and starts drinking and gets violent. I might think, oh, dad's scary. I need to stay away from dad. Or we're told you're a bad girl because you had an accident in your pants because you're potty training and learning. I'm a bad girl. That's going to be dropped into our subconscious mind. So we're absorbing everything that we're hearing. And so around the age of 7 is when our brain starts developing and our ego comes online. This is when we start to realize that we're separate, that we have characteristics that are different than other people, and we start comparing ourselves. 7 is the start of the adolescent chair because it goes 7 to 24, which is pre-adolescence, adolescence, and post-adolescence. And the way that I frame this chair is our ego defenses, our protectors. Who did I have to become in order to be loved and to belong and to stay safe? This is where we might say, oh, I'm going to be the good girl, or I'm going to be the class clown because that's the way that I get attention. I'm going to be the perfectionist because that's how I get love. This is when we might numb out some of those emotions from the child chair because they're too big. And so this is where the seed of addiction is born. I don't want to feel this because it feels too painful and it's not acceptable to my parents, for example, or caregivers or teachers or whoever. And so how do I get rid of this feeling? Anxiety and depression. We live in the past and the future. And we make up a lot of stories and assumptions about the world and who we are and where we fit into it. So this is where I often say, this is where we mask up. This is where we hide that inner child, that authenticity, that true self, because we want to belong and we want to be acceptable. And so fast forward, when our prefrontal cortex is fully online, the adult chair starts at age 25. And so if we had healthy models teaching us how to communicate our needs and how to feel our feelings and how to navigate life's challenges and how to live in the present moment, at 25, we kind of slide into the adult chair pretty seamlessly. And that's where we live with presence. We live in fact and truth. We are able to feel our emotions and navigate triggers, but oftentimes we're not taught how. And not for any slight on our parents or our caregivers or our teachers. I always believe people are doing the best they can with the tools that they have. But when people come to me and they're like, well, I don't know what I'm feeling, or I don't know how to communicate my needs, oftentimes it goes back to a belief that happened in childhood. And so to answer your question, the way that I work with clients most of the time is to really I hate to use the word dissect, but we're like little investigators. And so it's like, okay, well, where did this belief start? When did you first learn that it was not okay for you to share yourself, or that this feeling was not okay? And so we might do some inner child work, reparenting, parts work. I have a part of me that feels I can't speak up. Okay, when did that happen? And so we'll kind of jump back in time. I do a lot of visualizations with clients, a lot of past work, but it's not in the therapy way where it's like, oh, let's lay on the couch for weeks at a time and dissect your childhood. We jump back and it's very quick.
Yeah.
It's like, let's meet with that part of you that was traumatized. Let's meet with that part of you and re-educate her or him about this is what's true. Mom and dad didn't know. And it's not their fault and they love you or they did the best that they could. I'm here now as the healthy adult in your life and I get to drive the ship. I'm here to navigate. I'm here to help.
Wow. There's a lot to unpack with what you said because there's one part of what you just said that I'm like, I've been through all those different parts of growing up in the adult chair model. Yeah, I was a lot more in the child, but it was definitely adolescence that I had a lot of the
Oh,
issues. So I was thinking about, oh yeah, I've had my run-ins with the law when I was 16, and not many people know that, but it's the truth
mm,
because of just some things that I was not processing my emotions in a healthy way. There was a lot of, yeah, I didn't really have good relationships with some people, including even my parents, which my parents sort of know that. They probably don't. So they probably find out in this episode that, yeah, I didn't really have a good relationship with you guys. Sorry.
yeah.
We can talk about it, but it's the truth. But there's something that you said about navigating those things that I think is so true is that we don't usually have, and I usually have used the phrase role models on the show because of not learning correctly how to address that. So the question back to you with knowing all this is with all the clients that you've had, maybe even what you have right now, out of the three chairs that you just discussed, what are
Mhm.
most people sitting in? And I'm just reading them off: the child chair, the adolescent chair, or the adult chair.
Oftentimes it's the adolescent chair
Mm,
because the adolescent is designed to keep us alive, safe, and acceptable. And who doesn't want to be alive, safe, and acceptable in the world?
yes.
It's just how we do that gets stuck. I learned, not me personally, but say I have a client, it's like, well, I can't speak up for myself because then I'm going to get yelled at, or I'm going to get rejected, or I'm going to get abandoned, or I'm going to get broken up with, or whatever. And so we learn in this adolescent chair, who do I have to become in order to stay alive, safe, and acceptable? And
But
oftentimes we mask up. And so when clients come to me, they're like, I don't understand why I keep running into the same problem over and over again, or I can't communicate with my husband, or my kids are running the show and I can't discipline them, or I can't speak up at work, or I have this anxiety that I can't get rid of, or I'm not sleeping at night. And so we get rattled and stuck in time. Most of the time, it is in this adolescent chair because we're trying to protect the emotions of that child. If emotions are not acceptable, then we're going to come up with a defense to cover them up. And it doesn't mean that the emotion goes away. Let's be honest, it just gets buried. And that's where disease comes up in the body. That's where we come out sideways. That's where people that are road rage, or it's like, I didn't know I had this anger inside of me. I'm like, because you buried it down so far. And so what I do with clients is help them to kind of peel back. And sometimes it's a peeling back layer by layer. Sometimes we just freaking jackhammer it and go straight to the core. It just depends on the flow of the session and what needs to come out. But most of the time we are stuck in our adolescent chair because it's too scary to feel those feelings, those core needs and core emotions. That's what we're trying to cover up.
have you been just describing my whole entire life? I think you have been because I literally have been sitting here like, yeah, that's what I did. Yep, I also did
Mhm.
that. Oh yeah, I
So did
did that
I.
other thing. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
so did I. But when we know better, we do better,
Hmm.
theoretically speaking, to quote Maya Angelou. But I think so many times I have clients that come to me, they're like, oh my God, I had no idea. And it's
Hmm.
like, well, how could you? Because we have blind spots. That's why people come to therapy and come to coaching. It's like, because we have blind spots. There's things about us that we can't see. I mean, I'm very honest about I have my own therapist that I see because I can't see all the parts of myself. And so we need people. We're not meant to do life alone.
You're a very brave person to be able to say that. I also have a therapist too, but
Oh
I mean
yeah.
it because some people aren't willing to admit that I need help, and I gotta show that. Yeah, I got all my shit together, which might not even be the truth.
No, I never claim to. And who wants to be with somebody that's got all their SHIT together? Meaningful connections are my secret sauce. That is what lights my heart on fire, is having those raw and authentic connections with people. And if I can't relate to you, yes, I have a lot of tools and techniques that I use with my clients. And I often say the best version of myself, the healthiest version of myself is when I am sitting here. And
Mm.
maybe not the healthiest, because I do like to think that I have a healthy lifestyle. But,
We
you
all
know,
do.
yes, it's like, I walk out of this office, I've got my own SHIT show waiting for me. It doesn't mean that I get off scot free. with not having struggles and challenges in life. That's why I have my therapist and I have my friends and I have people that I talk to help navigate my own challenges. And I think that that's a beautiful part of mirroring for people, that there is nothing wrong with needing therapy, needing coaching. I think the healthiest people in the world are the ones that go to therapy and coaching because they know that they can't do it themselves.
I would have told you 5 years ago, you're insane for saying that. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
would have been one of those people like, yep, I'm not going to go because I know that will make me seem weak. And I know you're a female. Let's just call it for what it is. For a male, it's even tougher because we're built in this society, and I'm talking specifically the United States because I have international listeners as well, that it's really tough to be able to express those emotions and be able to articulate what is actually going on because we're told we need to be tough. We need to be strong. We need to be courageous. We need to be able to be all, do all, see all. And I think that's where we have so many adolescent issues. So because
Exactly.
we're not processing those because that's the impressionable age that we start to really form a lot of those different attitudes, beliefs, perceptions. And that makes me understand a lot more why it took me so long to finally recognize that it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah. It's actually very healthy. And that's, again, you hit the nail on the head with that is an adolescent mask
Yes.
that many men, because I have several male clients that say the same thing. And it's like, well, I can't do that. I'll be soft,
Yes.
or I'll be seen as weak, or I'll be seen as X, Y, and Z. And so I hate to say that's the problem of society nowadays, but it is, because we are so thirsty for these meaningful connections, but we're all wearing these sumo suits. We have this
Yes.
armor on. And so, how do you connect at the heart level when you have all this padding and protection? And not to say that you need to bare your soul and your heart to anybody that'll listen, because of course we want to have that discernment in the adult chair that we didn't have in the child chair. We want to have that discernment of, is this person safe? But knowing that as an adult, I have discernment now to make those choices,
Yes.
to say, you are a safe person for me. Whereas in childhood, we may not have had that option or that choice because of circumstances or for lack of brain development.
And I think that sometimes the other part of it that we often miss the mark on is being able to respect the differences that we all bring to that table because we all have different ways in which we're coming from. Sometimes other people are shutting other people down when we're all saying the same thing, but we're saying it in different ways or different words. And I think that also hinders or hampens the conversation. And what's the worst example that we could ever mention that is the problem that we all have? Social media, because we
Mm-hmm.
go on and do that, and that's a reflection. That's why it saddens me to see the statistics about the kids that are engaged in social media have the most depression, anxiety related symptoms, even suicidal ideations, and it
It's so
scares
sad
me. It scares me.
because we're all comparing ourselves to each other, and they are literally both biologically and energetically in their adolescent chair. And so even when I work with adolescents now, I know that their brain has not reached that adult development. Their prefrontal cortex is totally not online. But I love that population because if I can even plant seeds of what it means to be a healthy human. And so when I work with adolescents and teenagers, it's often like, okay, well, think about the healthiest version of yourself, or what would you tell a friend to do, and those kind of things to get them out of their own space. And I do that with my adult clients too, but I do believe that social media in comparison is, it's a struggle for adults, and let alone the kids that their brains aren't developed.
My mom and my dad would both say growing up, well, we would play in the streets until the lights turned on, and then that's when we know we had to go home for dinner. I almost had this idea in my head of, and I know this sounds really crazy, and you're probably going to look at me with four eyes, and I understand completely. But I'm like, why don't we have that sort of time anymore? I mean, I think they have somewhat of
Yeah.
an idea here. Just get the stupid stuff that's in our hands or in our ears and covering our eyes too, because we got all those devices now as well.
Mm-hmm.
The metaverse, if you will, going around. Why don't we just put those away and give ourselves some of that quality time? But don't respond to that because I want to move on because
No, it's fine. But I
yeah.
think it is coming back to that adult chair and being in the present moment.
Yes, it
You know,
is.
that's what the adult chair is. It's living with consciousness. It's living in presence. It's living in fact and truth. You know, I
Yes.
could say, look at social media and say, oh, well, that person has a better life than I do, or they're happier than I am. Is that true? How do I know it's true? Am I making
Yes.
up a story? And
Yes.
then coming back to that, what's true for me right here, right now, is that I have this, 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 and this. And I know we talked earlier about acceptance of the suffering. If I'm not happy in my life, what is it that is keeping me from being happy? And I first have to accept that I'm not happy before I'm able to make a change.
Oh,
You
I
know,
gotta
it's
move. I gotta move on from that because I could
yeah.
dive into that even more. Yeah, but
That'll be a whole nother episode.
that's a whole other episode. I think that we could easily dive into that subject matter.
Yeah,
I want to talk about your business because
sure.
it is a very fascinating concept when I was looking at it. And for my listeners, I'll have the website in the episode notes, but it's Conscious Living Therapy and Coaching, the name of your business.
Yes.
I have never seen this before, and I've seen a lot of different web pages with a lot of different businesses. You have 9 core values. So
Mm.
there's things from meaningful connections, consistent integrity, heart-centered. For my listeners, you have to go check it all out. It's great content. But out of the 9 values, what would you say, Jenny, is the most important one to you? And I know that's a big, tall order
Oh,
to
I gotta pick
ask.
one.
You gotta just pick only one. Yeah, yep, I'm putting you on the spot with that. But what's the
Oh,
number one thing that through your business you really want people to be like, yeah, when I think of this, that's how I think of Jenny and her business.
radical authenticity.
Mm, mm.
What you see is what you get. I don't mask up. I don't, I want to be as authentic as possible because I don't want you to show up inauthentically. If we want real, and that's like literally top value is authenticity, very, very close second is that meaningful connection. I may have cheated on the answer because I know
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
kind
you
of
did actually. I
I
wasn't gonna call
did.
you out. I was not
I
gonna
know
call you
I
out
cheated.
because you could easily correct to be like, "There's 10," and then I will look like the idiot because there
No,
was
no, no.
actually 9 at the time with this recording.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, those two are my go-tos because we can't have meaningful connection without authenticity. And so when I think about what it means to show up real, I don't want your fake self. I don't want you to come in and say, oh, yeah, everything's great, everything's this, because then I'm going to meet you there. But we're not going to get any meaningful work done unless we go to those pits of hell, which I often say to my clients, like, I will go to the pits of hell with you. I've been there, I've done that. It doesn't scare me. And
Mm.
so let's walk out together, but I've got to know where you are so that I can be the best service to you. And nothing is off limits. And that's where I think the radical authenticity. I've talked, I wouldn't believe some of the things people bring up in sessions. And I'm just like, okay, cool. So you drink 2 bottles of wine every single night. Cool. All right, let's talk about it. Oh, I cheated on my husband. Okay, let's talk about it. Nothing is off limits. And I think when you can really bring your true self and be witnessed and seen, it takes the shame out of it. Shame is such a pervasive emotion and it really serves no purpose to me. That belief that I am just inherently bad.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, what are some of the places in my life yet where I still hold on to shame? And
Yeah.
that's not allowing me to be the most authentic. And literally, I thought of 3 things. I'm going to go
Mm,
write about them and journal about them now
yeah.
after you saying that, because those 3 things, if I let go of those and I'm really truthful to myself and I'm really considerate of the fact that I know I need to work on those things, wow, the
Yeah.
radical authenticity, those same words, I'm stealing those words right now.
Yeah.
The radical authenticity of myself would just explode. And I feel that's why, like you said, having somebody to be able to talk about that with is so important.
And
But
how freeing is it?
yeah, it
It's
is
like
freeing.
you don't have to carry that armor anymore. And I
Yeah.
think another quick little side note, a lot of times clients get guilt and shame mixed up. Guilt is I did something bad. Guilt is a very healthy emotion. Guilt, I cheated on my husband. Okay. Why do you feel guilty about that? It's a behavior that I did that is not in alignment with my values. Cool. Let's talk about it. Let's realign you with your values. Shame is just that pervasive, I am bad. What it feels like to me is just like this nasty slime that's like, I'm just a bad person. But I believe everyone is inherently good. Everyone has good parts. We may have quote unquote bad behaviors. We may have ways that we get out of alignment with ourselves. But if we can realign with our heart and with our soul purpose and like, what am I actually here to experience in this life? Then the other stuff just kind of falls away. And if we can get back to the truth of who we are, then we'll have those meaningful connections, which is what makes life rich and meaningful and fulfilling and beautiful.
It's all about having that fulfillment. And even with my clients, I even ask some of them. I actually have a few right now who are going through this and saying, "What is your purpose? Have you ever
Mm,
thought about what your purpose is?" And then they take a step back, being like, "No, I've just gone through life and I've had to deal with things as they come along." And I was like, "But what's the purpose of doing those things? Are they helping you to achieve what those goals are? Are they helping you to
mhm.
become the best version of who you are?"
Yeah. Like,
So,
how do you become the healthiest version of yourself and realign with that every single day? I set 3-word intentions every day of like, what am I intending for? I can look different. I set like a word of the year, and I have different things that I do to try to keep myself in alignment. And I say aligned, that's actually my word for 2024 is aligned. And so a lot of times when I feel off balance or if I'm tuning in and I have more anxiety, not sleeping, or maybe I'm getting sick more often, it's like, okay, where am I out of alignment? And then how do I get back into, you know, connected to myself, meaningful connections, not just with others, but with ourselves. And just own your life. We get this one precious life.
mm,
And
yes.
so, how are we going to make the most of it while acknowledging the fact that, yes, there is suffering in the world? Yes, we are going to experience pain. We can't know joy if we don't know sorrow. We can't know light if we don't know dark. So, we're here to experience that duality and learn through contrast, but we don't have to sit in one place or the other. It's not that all or nothing, it's both.
Yeah.
And how do we learn to accept all parts as a beautiful tapestry?
I was literally just thinking like the word tapestry and how that all weaves together.
Yeah.
Jenny, we're out of time. I mean, this has been an awesome conversation. There was so many more questions. I would love to have you back on the show to
I'd
continue
love
this
to.
conversation.
It's been such a great conversation.
But in the meantime, could you, in the last few minutes, pitch your business if people are interested in maybe getting some coaching? Maybe if they're in
Yeah,
the South Carolina area, I know I have a few listeners down there. Maybe they are interested in getting some therapy from you. Maybe
sure.
you could share a little bit of how they can contact you as well. Feel free to take the last few minutes to do that.
Sure. My website is trueconsciousliving.com. I'm also active on social media. Facebook is at True Conscious Living, Instagram, and TikTok as well. I bit the bullet and joined the TikTok. So every now and again, I'll post just short clips about life challenges or how to overcome certain things. I also have a free download on my website on uncovering your self-worth. So if you go to at True Conscious Living, there's a pop-up where you can enter in your email and opt in to receive that free download so that you can start the journey of uncovering your worth and who you are. Because I think when we own who we are as precious beings on this planet and believe that we are worthy of having that meaningful life, that's the first step. And so that's a good maybe starting point just to get to know me a little bit. I have a blog that I post every once or twice a month or so on just various topics. So you can always subscribe to receive updates to my website and updates to my blog. And yeah, feel free to reach out via email, via social media. I'd love to connect with you, see how things are going, and if there's any way that I can help.
I will put all that in the episode notes. And Jenny, I have to say, you've talked a lot today about what people can go through when it comes to the different chairs. You've talked
Mm-hmm.
a lot about what you are trying to do authentically with what you have as a background. I love the fact that you being a teacher beforehand led you into really helping others. And I think that having that nurturing attitude, which you certainly have exhibited today as well, even with me, because I'm like sitting here thinking, well, there's a lot of things I can work on. There's a lot of things I can do here. But you said it in such a way that, although that wasn't your intention, I was affected by it. And I can only
Oh,
imagine what
wow.
others are, how they're impacted by you, because you carry that aura that's very calming and also at the same time, let's get some business done. So, like, you have that
Yeah.
seriousness aspect to it, and I think that's what's called balance, and we need to have that balance.
Well,
And
thank you.
so I think that, and for all those reasons, Jenny, thanks so much for being on Speaking from the Heart today. It was really a privilege to have this conversation, and we'll definitely continue this conversation in a future episode. So thank you.
You're welcome. I would love that. Thank you so much for having me.
Again, I want to thank Jenny for spending time with me, being able to talk about all these different types of aspects of her life. I think that in many ways we serve as different teachers for each other. Being able to work through the different parts of our life to find meaning in order to create that level of engagement in our lives oftentimes means that we have to spend time in certain chairs that we are learning and growing in, whether it's the child, whether it's the adolescent, or the adult chair, which I feel like I haven't spent enough time in the adult chair myself, even after hearing this perspective today. But how we find our way through the pain and all the suffering also stems from how we learn how to grow within our own perspectives, meaning that we are learning some of these things when we're younger and still applying some of those same tools today. And when Jenny was explaining this whole process to me, my eyes lit up because now I'm starting to understand how it all connects together. And I think for many of us, we don't realize how those dots interconnect with each other to be able to work through some of the stuff that is usually in the basement of our lives because we put it in storage. We often forget about it. Subconsciously, we often are working through all kinds of different things that we have going on in our lives. But yet at the same time, that pain and suffering that we're struggling through, trying to figure out what's the best modus operandi to keep moving forward, means that we have to suffer, go through pain, do this trial by error type of process in order to work through some of the things that we got going on in our life because we have no other role model to turn to. We have to be that person, though, for others, especially if we see them walking down that same path. Being able to say, stop, don't go down that road. It's too dangerous. I've been down that road before. But sometimes we shout so loud that even we scare those other people. They don't know how to react to some of the things that we have learned in our life, and they have to walk down that road themselves. We all have challenges. We all have to find the way in which we navigate through them. We all live unique lives as a result. So how do we tether ourselves? One of the things that I think is really important to understand is that we can't be afraid of what that outcome will look like down the road, even if we're afraid of what hell might bring for us. Because if we're able to just build and build and build, we can prevent some of these things from ever happening in the first place, which is what I think Jenny was really trying to say to us. When we look at ourselves in the mirror, at the end of the day, what's looking back at us? Are we going to be represented by all the struggles, all the hell that we have been through? Or are we actually going to be appreciative of who we are as a person? Are we going to be able to sit in one of those 3 chairs that she talked about? And I think out of anything that I've ever heard on this show, especially with what she has been certified in, this makes a lot of sense to me. Are we numbing out these feelings that we have? How are we trying to go about eliminating that feeling? Are we just pushing it to the side, as I'm mentioning earlier? Are we putting it in the basement, or are we actually going to take it head on? Which means that we have to navigate in a more effective manner the triggers. So how do we address those wants and needs? How do we get unstuck, especially if we're stuck in one particular type of chair? How we address those concerns means that we have to have a mindset, not looking at it from an adolescent perspective, not looking at it from a child perspective, but perhaps looking at it from an adult perspective, from what we are by age. Now, you might be just chuckling to yourself a little bit listening to all this because you might be saying, Josh, I know of a lot of people that are stuck in the adolescent chair. They just can't seem to get themselves out of it. And they're 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, and they never got out of it. And I understand. But maybe there's more to what is on the surface. So instead of laughing about it, why not do something about it? You see, I think that part of this is about being passive and being able to actually address it because we're afraid of what might be the problem with that person. We're trying to take a little bit of responsibility for it, but at the same time, we might be doing more damage by not addressing it head on. Those are real legitimate concerns. So when the shit show happens in that person's life because you didn't do anything about it, whose fault is it then? Theirs or yours? We have to be able to discern and have the courage and the bravery to be able to address those sort of circumstances, especially if we're saying that we are that friend for that person. It really means, though, having a reset button. Having that ability to have that space to be able to create that. Because obviously you wouldn't go up to somebody randomly and say, your life is a shit show. You wouldn't do that. And I wouldn't do that to anybody because I've had that happen to me. My life was a shit show 4 years ago as I was doing this whole process of healing and growing and figuring out where I needed to be in this bigger context of what life is all about. And there wasn't anybody around saying, you need to fix this and you need to fix that. It was up to me to seek out that help. So there has to be a level of responsibility at the same time when we're talking about this, which I think that we have to figure out what that reset button looks like, whether that is with somebody else, whether that's through writing and journaling and figuring out that these are toxic thoughts on our own, or a combination of both, which is better than doing absolutely nothing, which most people, I would say, are not thirsty for being able to figure out what they have going on in their life. Ultimately, it's really about asking the question, what is true for me right now? What is true for me in the future? Because let's face it, if we're not authentic about what our intentionality is in terms of working towards what our end goal is, how we want to be remembered for the rest of our life, we have to figure out how we can be authentic. In other words, don't be a fake. There's a lot to unpack with what I've just said the last few minutes to really summarize this, and I think that if Jenny and I continued this conversation, we would have unpacked a lot more. But really, what we both discussed today, which I think applies to all of us, is about how we take the shame out of knowing that we need to continue to develop ourselves and not be ashamed of who we are right now. You know, I feel in this world that sometimes we get held back from our limiting beliefs, the things that we have and we manifest that aren't necessarily true, but yet we have to keep figuring out ways to keep working forward towards a brand new world. On this show, I've admitted so many different times with so many different types of individuals that I've had about the impacts of having some of these conversations and bringing to light some of the things that even I personally, your podcast host, have to keep working through. And even with my clients through my business at Your Speaking Voice LLC, I have to keep figuring out how can I consume better content in my life so that I'm not always stuck in one of those past chairs that I no longer believe that I should be sitting in. But what I really think is the whole important concept of this is really about figuring out the people, the items in our lives, and the connections that we need to create in order to truly transform what we have going on in our lives. It all starts, though, with finding the teachers and finding the people that regardless of what kinds of crises that will come up in our life, whether it's today, tomorrow, or in the future, that will allow us to keep pushing forward and to separate us from that pain and suffering that we have stuffed in the basement. It doesn't mean that we ignore any of it. It just means that we have to find a better way to embrace it. And today I'm asking you to embrace it. Not just for the things in which you might be sitting in one particular chair and doing, but how you can get in touch with tethering yourself to a better support system so that you never have to walk through some of those dangerous, disgusting things again. Because those things, the most extreme of things, will never repeat themselves. Except if you don't work on your authentic self to be able to change who you are today to be better for the future. Let's do this. Let's make this happen. All it means is that you have to just realize that maybe there is just some limiting things that are holding you back today. And all you have to do is just walk forward. Because let's face it, Hell doesn't have to scare you anymore. Life doesn't have to be a shit show. And let's face it, if you develop your brain and you create those opportunities that allow you to navigate through it, your future will be much brighter and much more authentic than it could ever possibly be. So get your butt off that chair and sit in a new seat. That hard plastic covering that you've been sitting on for a long time might have your butt imprint on it, but there's a new seat waiting for you that is a lot more comfortable, a lot more exciting to sit in. And I've heard that maybe it gives you a couple extra bonus things in your life, a little bit of extra tools at your disposal to make you feel a little bit more comfortable to sit down in, focus your attention, and learn some incredible things along the way. Thanks for listening to episode number 132 of Speaking from the Heart, and I look forward to hearing from your heart very soon.
Thanks for listening. For more information about our podcast and future shows, search for Speaking from the Heart to subscribe and be notified wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit us at www.yourspeakingvoice.biz for more information about potential services that can help you create the best version of yourself. See you next time.